Hello, everyone. IMS welcomes you all to our webinar series, Future You, Set Your Career Compass Right with Experts Insight. And I am Kalyani Majumdar, your host for today's webinar. So today's session is on careers in human resources. And our topic is how an HR manager becomes a business leader. So in this webinar, you'll get to know about the career in human resource management. What does it encompass? What are the job opportunities in human resource management? How to progress from human resource management, HR manager to a leadership position in a firm? Where does one begin in order to have a successful career in HR? How to build your profile to stand out from the rest? How does an MBA help in getting your foot in the door? Entry level to senior position, what is the trajectory like, and more. So today for this session, we have our speaker, Sebati Iyengar. She's the HR director with Royal Canin, a subsidiary of Mars Incorporated. Sebati is an alumna of TIS. She's a business leader with a rich experience in applying human resource practices and tools to nurture successful and sustainable businesses. She has worked at leadership positions at top firms such as Godrej Group, Asian Paints, Wipro Limited, and now at Royal Canin. So welcome, Sebati Iyengar, and thank you so much for being here today for this session.
Thank you, Kalyani. It's my pleasure. And that was a very generous and flattering introduction. So looking forward to all the questions and looking forward to interacting with the students and sharing about my life journey.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so let's start from your career trajectory. So what made you decide that you want to pursue human resource management as your career path? Like, was there any particular trigger for the same? Did this happen before the career path, or did it happen after, the other way around?
I was a fresher when I had joined TIS. I had a fairly unconventional graduation, which was in rural development. So TIS has a rural campus in Tuljapur. We were the first batch. I spent a lot of time working in villages. And then I was wondering, I've learned so much around being with people, working with people, driving change, structuring stuff. But at the same time, I wanted to build a corporate career. And HR just seems like the most logical fit. There were two campuses, XLRI and TIS. So whenever one thinks HR, one thinks of these two campuses. So I applied to both of them, also gave my CAT. But somewhere I was very clear that it was working with people and driving change that I was really interested in. And HR lent itself very comfortably to that frame. So yeah, I finished my graduation, gave my entrance exams, and immediately joined in the master's course.
Okay. So can you take us through your career trajectory very briefly, because you've done so much. So, but of course, we will be taking in some of the other questions as well in between. So yeah. So can you take us through your career trajectory very briefly?
So it's
right
been
from
about
12 and a half. Yeah, right from, how did the internship kind of, build your interest and all, right from there to your profession, to your career. Yeah.
Like I said, I was a fresher when I joined TIS. I knew a lot about social work, but I knew very little about HR and what it really means. Right. I had, in our batch, there were 63. And I still remember that there was almost an equal balance of people with work experience and people who were freshers. So we learned a bit from them of what the job could entail. And we had something called field work in TIS, which gives you exposure to different organizations. Every semester you do an internship in a separate organization. So for me, it was National Stock Exchange. That was the first field work. It was in BKC, that learned stuff there. Went to Tata Steel. Tata Steel, again, a manufacturing setup, completely different ecosystem altogether. Summers happened just when the whole financial crisis of 2008 was happening. Sure. So it was happening right as we were doing our summer interviews. And that was a fascinating process. I got placed with Deutsche Bank. I did a project on women leadership mentoring, which was really appreciated. Third fieldwork was Monsanto. Again, learned so much there. And the fourth one was Capgemini. So over just these 5 internship and project experiences, you can see the breadth of sectors. There is agri, there is IT, there is whole banking, of course, there's manufacturing, and then there's a bit of financial services. So all of it was encompassed. And I still remember thinking about finals. And while Deutsche Bank did give me a PPI, converted that. But I also felt that it's in local organizations where the number of employees are very large, where the learning is really high. So I went and joined Wipro. I did business partnering there for about 2.5 years. Then spent about 7 years with Asian Paints. And there I did a variety of roles. Sales HR, so right from recruitment, learning, policies, rewards, performance management, that's the sales HR piece. Very early on in my career, which is 2014, about 5 years when I had joined from when I graduated from this, I was asked to lead a couple of mergers. And that was a big shift. That was a big turning point, because that gave me exposure of working directly with business leaders. So far I was executing stuff well, but the business leader was like a customer, and we were kind of partnering with that customer. But when you do something like a merger and then you set the HR strategy for that business, you become a partner. And that's a very interesting shift that happened very early on. The other piece that happened early on was managing managers. And in human resources, you can have all kinds of career. You can have an individual career, role career for a very long time, become a specialist, becoming an expert. But you can also go down the generalist route and lead large teams. My route was more in that space. And again, leading managers is a completely different skill set, because they have also graduated from great campuses. They are also intelligent, well organized. So how does one add value is a completely different ballgame. So yeah, did mergers, did talent acquisition, campus, employer branding. And then I was feeling a little ambitious. I felt that I'd done a lot at Asian Paints, but how could I take it to the next level? And that's when the Godrej opportunity came in. I took up this role of becoming the head HR for a dairy company. This was fairly large. This was about 3,000 employees, on roll and off roll. The HR team itself was 30 members, and I was leading all of them. So suddenly I was part of the big boys club. And that was again a very interesting transition. Did that for a couple of years, did a small role with recruitment again. And in April, joined Mars as the HR director for Royal Canin.
Okay. So since you were already, you did cover quite a bit about what all you were doing in all these organizations, but if you could just tell us how working as a HR business partner for Wipro, how was it different from being a head talent acquisition at Asian Paints and then Godrej Group? How different are these? Like, as the industry, as you shift from one to the other as per industries are concerned, how does it change your role?
So HR is one of those functions which is largely industry agnostic. And all of you aspirants who are thinking about, what sector to go into, what function to go into, HR and finance, both of these are fairly industry agnostic. So of course, the industry brings in its own nuances, but the basic processes remain the same. The basic objective of the function remain the same. And there's a lot of learning that you can extrapolate from one business to another. So that's something that I would encourage all of you to think about, that if you do want variety in the kind of industries that you want to work in, HR is a great place to be. Many of my colleagues in sales have often complained with a tinge of envy, saying that we are stuck in this sector. We have done 10 years in this sector, now nobody will hire us. So if you have done 10 years in FMCG, banking will not hire you. If you have done 10 years in banking, manufacturing will not hire you, etc. But HR gives a fair amount of flexibility. So, yeah.
But how different was how different was the work at Wipro and at Asian Paints and then at Godrej Group?
A bit of a framework of how HR operates, and then I'll give you what are the possible combinations. So HR has a few functions which are expertise functions. Center of expertise is what they are called. Recruitment is one of them. Learning is one of them. Rewards or compensation is one of them. And employee relations or industrial relations. So how one handles unions, how one ensures that compliances are done. That's one. Apart from these, you have an entire range of HR business partnering roles. They are responsible for partnering with the business, finding what is the people problem that they have, creating a solution, partnering with some of these expertise teams. You also have a certain team of people who generally administer processes. Payroll is a very important process. We all want to get our salaries on time. We all want appointment letter on time and relieving letter on time. So HR operations generally falls into that as well. Benefits administration, whether it be Sodexo coupons or cars, falls under that. Okay. So these are the three buckets, if you had just had to think of it. The HR business partner lies in the center. You have centers of expertise, and then you have the operations side of it. Okay. Now, depending on how HR is structured in the organization, one person could be doing all of it. Correct. Or you could have very, very different teams handling each of these pieces of work. Usually that depends on the scale of the organization. Bigger organizations will typically have some bit of differentiation. Wipro, for instance, when I was working there, it was about 1 lakh employees, and now they are almost at 2.5 to 3 lakh employees. So the HR business partner did no hiring, no recruitment whatsoever. Okay. But Asian Paints, just in terms of the sheer number, it's about 5,000, 6,000 employees. So in Asian Paints, the sales HR, the business partners do recruitment. Okay. They did entry-level recruitment, and the managerial recruitment was centralized because that was seen as something which is an expertise function. You need to know much more. You need to have industry knowledge. So that was centralized. There was value there. Okay. So I hope that clarifies. There is a breadth of things that you can do. Sometimes it's 1 or 2 people doing everything, but sometimes it could be extremely differentiated.
So what are the core skills required for one to excel in HR? Can you tell us like maybe 3 soft skills and 3 hard skills that one must have in order to excel?
I think one of the things that Peter Drucker said, and I as an HR leader definitely believe in that, is all these functions are immaterial. Finally, it's about being a business leader. Okay. And the more one focuses on the business, the better one can do any of these functions. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but that is the essence of what he said. So for any managerial role, listening with empathy is extremely important. That's quite a core skill, which helps one make sense of what is the information which is coming in and then finding a solution. The second big skill is around collaboration. So there are a lot of ideas which look fantastic on a piece of paper, and it seems like they can really change the world. It's so powerful. But when it comes to execution, even the best of the ideas and even the simplest of ideas can fail. Collaboration skills are essential for execution. Collaboration is nothing but, are you able to understand the requirement of the other person? Are you able to deliver on time? If both of you get stuck, are you able to find a middle ground? That is quite important because that helps execution. Okay. And the third one that I would say is problem solving. So problem solving is all about diagnosing and then offering customized solutions. Many times there is a whole operations that HR has to deliver, but there are also unique solutions. People are unique. Companies are unique. The stage of maturity, everything is very different. So rather than copying one best practice into another company or another situation, finding what is the real problem and finding a solution for that problem is what differentiates a great HR manager from an average one. So I would summarize these 3: listening with empathy, collaboration, and problem solving.
Because a lot of people do think like, okay, if you're not good in math, maybe, human resource could be is this a myth? You need
complete myth. Okay. Complete myth. Every HR leader has to be good at data analytics. Yeah. If you have to manage anything of scale, you need some kind of metrics which are giving you a sense of how things are progressing. Right. And the people who look at data need to understand that data. So hence numerical skills are quite important.
Okay.
And in some sense, numerical skills are important in all functions of management, whether it be finance, whether it be sales, whether it be operations, whether it be HR. Every organization works in a metric-driven way nowadays. So we have to measure stuff, we have to ensure that those measurements are correct, and then we have to see how we can bring improvements. So that is a complete myth. The level of complexity in numerical skills that one needs, that would depend from role to role. Probably the compensation expert needs more, and maybe the business partner needs a bit less. But there is to be a basic threshold for everyone, including HR.
Yeah, let's take some questions. Somebody wants to know which colleges are the best for human resource, and which kind of work we will do in future as fresher in HR and corporate. And there is also another question about in the same loop. Can language be a barrier to connect with workers? Yeah. So
let me take that one at a time.
So which colleges are best for HR, and what kind of work we will be doing in future as fresher, HR and corporate?
Yeah. So TIS and Excel definitely have an edge over all other colleges in HR, including all of the IIMs. Right. If you're serious about pursuing a career in HR, then I would highly recommend that you appear for the entrance and try to go to one of these two. MDI Gurgaon, SCM HRD, even IIM Ranchi, they have a dedicated course for HR. These are some of the other colleges where I've really encountered some good professionals coming from.
Okay. And so the next one was about, can language be barrier to connect with workers? I think, what if, for example, in industry, in IR and all, when you are handling factory workers and all, language can be, right? Barriers, like, if you are working somewhere in a remote town or something. Yeah.
Yes, it can. At the same time, we'll be surprised at how much Hindi and English workers know. Okay. So it's best to go without assumptions. Specifically now that social media has proliferated every single small town, every person seems to have a mobile phone and is consuming content from there. I think it's a good thing. It does ease the connection with workers if you are able to converse in the same language. I know of many people who have learned basics of that language, and the rest of it they do in Hindi or English or any other language they're comfortable with, and the workers are still fine. I think as human beings, they appreciate good intent, and they appreciate somebody who is having the willingness to listen and understand and really be fair to them. So on one hand, it's important, but at the same time, don't overestimate the importance of really wanting to connect with them.
Right.
They'll see through that no matter what language.
Okay. Yeah. So can HR graduates join CX or recruitment agencies like AT and Canin? Is there any scope of MBA HR graduates in joining such companies?
I know that Hewitt used to hire. Ernst & Young hired. I have a couple of colleagues, a couple of my classmates who joined Ernst & Young. They've had careers there ever since. So some of the consulting companies do come to MBA colleges and hire, though not all. AT Kearney, for instance, I think may be preferring more of laterals. McKinsey prefers a little bit more of laterals.
Okay. There is a question about, we will be talking about profile building in a bit. So for TIS, how do we go about the preparation for personal interview, considering their rejection ratio is very high? Are there any recommended, IIMs for pursuing HR? No, you've already answered that. So let that be. Yeah. So for TIS.
It definitely appreciates knowledge, awareness about what's happening in the country. They look for an appreciation of the social lens. It's not that it's the only criteria, but it is very core to their ethos. that they hire or they select candidates who have some bit of social orientation. So I would definitely encourage everyone to brush up on their general knowledge and also to have a certain perspective. Also, lived perspectives are always more powerful than newspaper read perspectives. So, or rather than being as somebody who can spout articles and quote books, while that is appreciated, but being able to give real life examples of how class, how gender, how anything that you're seeing around you in terms of the environment, in terms of policies, how is that affecting people, and what are your thoughts around it? I think that's a bit of an added advantage in this.
There's a lot of questions about TISNET and TISMAT. But the thing is, you can definitely, you can probably, because now obviously, the format has changed, as you already mentioned. So the thing is, can you talk a little bit about the generic tips that they can follow for TISNET to prepare for TISNET?
I would leave that to you completely, Kalyani. I believe what I do know is that IMS is a great institution, and they are extremely thorough in the way that they track any small change also in the test. So many times people who have graduated, they are not aware of these changes, but as an institution, IMS tracks everything. So do talk to whoever is your counselor, mentor, and make sure that you're copying down all of the inputs that they are giving. That would be the best way to prepare.
So yeah, so let's take some more questions. Yeah, so let's talk about how to build a profile, as in how to build your resume right now, as in what all are the things that they can do now. Are there any online courses that they can also keep doing so that there's something more on their profile that says that, okay, yes, they are inclined towards human resource?
Absolutely. In fact, one of the wonders of the last maybe 3 years, I won't even say 5 years, is the proliferation of online good quality content that is available. You have multiple platforms. Udemy is a great one. Coursera is a great one. You have LinkedIn Learning, which is also fairly good. The SAP Learning is great. SAP Learning has a couple of programs on HR, which is great. So what it helps is if you complete some of the courses from these kind of online courses, it gives you a basic sense of what is the latest thing happening in that function. And that shows interest and depth of preparation when you go for an interview. So many people, the interviewers are looking for something to differentiate, something to select you over the 3-4 other candidates whom they are also interviewing. And doing courses like this can be a great differentiator. Depending on what your background is, there are fairly basic courses, which is what is human resource management, but there are also specialized courses on data analytics. Design thinking is a big one. Design thinking helps not just HR, but other functions as well. You could learn something about diversity and inclusion, because again, that's a very relevant topic that organizations are interested in nowadays. If performance management is your interest, there are courses around that. So I would encourage everyone to go and check it out. A lot of the courses are free. Some of them are fairly reasonable, 200, 300 rupees, which sometimes can be just the cost of dinner. And it will help.
Yeah.
Sometimes coffee, yes. Coffee or dinner. But yeah, you can invest that much and you can get a sense of what expertise in HR looks like.
Okay. Can a HR professional change their career path after 5 years to some other field? Is it possible?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Like in finance or marketing or...
Yes.
Yeah.
I have multiple colleagues on, even my classmates who have done that. I know someone who's completely moved to operations. I know someone who moved to pre-sales in IT. I had 2 bosses who had moved from HR to becoming a plant head. And they were very, very successful plant heads. They actually were able to manage the entire plant operations and bring improvements in a fantastic way. So that's completely possible. It depends on your interest area. It depends on the organization's ability to support that interest area. But first, your interest and your performance matters.
Okay.
Of examples.
There's a question about what sort of areas can an individual work in an organization after completing MBA HR? How can he or she branch out after a significant amount of experience? So can you also take this along with my question of, can you tell us the basic step by step, as in right from the entry level to the senior level, how do you grow in HR in an organization?
Person's career is different, but if you had to chalk out the first 10 years of someone's career, after which, let's say, one decides to specialize and do what they want, typically that will involve one sales or business partnering role. So if it is FMCG, it will be sales, but if it's something like IT, then it will just be business partnering. Or it could be business partnering for finance, for R&D, for IT, for legal, those kind of functions. But one business partnering role, 2 to 3 years, is essential. It really gives you a sense of how business operates, what are the different roles, what does each role do, where are the problems which come, and all of that. Also gives you a lot of training on how to handle volume, because usually the ratio of employees to HR will be anything between 300, 400,000. So one gets quickly trained on managing a volume of requests from employees and their managers.
Okay.
Second, a plant HR role is recommended. The earlier in the career, the better. Many organizations believe that the first role that a management trainee in HR should do is the plant role. And then they ship them off to some plant. HUL does it, Asian Paints does it.
Yeah.
And that's again quite important, because plant realities are very different from realities in sales and some of these other functions. So the plant may or may not have a union, but at least knowing about workers, knowing about labor laws. There's a huge level of legislation in the country on what you can do with employees and what you should not do. And the plant HR role is the best place to learn all of those laws. It's a place to learn about group behavior as well, because plants are such stable setups. Nothing dramatically changes from 1 year to 5 years.
Right.
It is just so stable that a lot of group dynamics plays out, and you get exposure to working in those group dynamics. You also get exposure to external influences. So you have multiple inspectors coming your way. The local community will have asked that, give us a school, give us a well, etc. You learn to manage all of that. So that's a completely different experience than a business partnering experience, where it's more about support the business, understand what they need, etc. So these two are essential. Then one usually has either one or two COE stints, which is Center of Expertise stints. It could either be in recruitment, it could be in learning, it could be in compensation. Okay. So any one of these three, one goes and does an expertise stint, 2 years. So there you're only focused on that function. You do not get into the business side of it, but you talk about how can you make that function better, more effective, what are the additional value adding things that one could be doing. And that's a different experience, because for the first time you are detached from a lot of action. Okay. But at the same time, designing some of these central initiatives can be very powerful. Okay. So you learn to do better design so that you can add value, and that's a different kind of learning. There's also a lot of influencing that comes in some of these roles, because so many stakeholders are there and you can't have different solutions for each stakeholder. So getting everybody on the same page, getting an initiative out of the ground, huge learning in those expertise roles. So usually after one does all of this, then one starts thinking about what is the area that they want to specialize in. How do they want to grow? Do they want to grow in the expertise function? Do they want to grow in the business partnering function? One final stint, and this is more of a recent evolution, is shared service experience. Okay. So more and more companies are setting up HR shared service. This is where operations get centralized. One technology is put, all operations are driven through that technology. It's all about efficiency. Nowadays, every company has a shared service. This is, again, something that's emerging now after the BPO evolution. After IT and finance got into this model, HR is getting into that model. So companies like have some kind of exposure to shared service, because it's just a huge way in which money is saved, cost savings happen, and efficiencies can be brought in. And in some sense, these kind of roles give you line management exposure much earlier compared to the other functions. So I would recommend these four, and then one chooses whatever is the area that one wants to build one's career.
So in today's scenario, what sort of scope is there for opting for HR while pursuing MBA? Will it be fruitful in terms of getting hands-on placement?
Yes, it will. I think in today's scenario, more and more companies are now realizing that there's a value to good HR. The pandemic changed a lot of things as well. There are more requests now coming from employees that companies are trying to solve. If you look at what's happening globally, there is a huge shortage of labor. If you look at entire US and Europe, there's a huge shortage of labor, and people are wondering what's happening, what can we get employees back to work, etc. So this is probably an age where HR is slated to shine. I saw a question bubble up in the chat that will HR automation kill HR? At least for us who are working in the field, we do not see any fear of that, because what it will do is make HR more strategic. The operations will be done by either the technology or by artificial intelligence. And where human judgment is needed, human expertise is needed, the professionals will be playing a role. So yes, and the future is very bright given everything that's happening in the world currently, and HR is here to stay.
Okay, so since you're anyway talking about the future of HR professionals and it's very bright, so if you how exactly it's evolving with AI and machine learning, and like almost every company now has these software apps and all, like Workline and Darwin Box and whatnot. So the thing is, how exactly now the HR is evolving as for like, obviously, now they are not doing all those activities anymore because the apps are doing it. So how exactly it's evolving? And you
Great about
an example as well, because you have been there, done that. So you were there when things were more manual, and then now you're here when everything is so much automated.
Let me give you an example from my own career. So Asian Paints used to have a written test for recruitment. Anybody who applied had to go through that written test. It was a pen and paper test. There were questions. So the question paper was printed, the answer sheet was printed. This was, one had to circle darken the circles. And then that was evaluated by whichever was the HR officer, and those who scored a certain marks, only they could go for interviews. Now, this had been there for decades, and it was a very set way of doing hiring. Everybody believed the value of doing this whole thing. Sometimes one would go to a new city and one would do like a mass recruitment where one would maybe 100 people, 200 people would be administer the test, the scores would be collected. So it was a great way of filtering. And filtering is very essential in recruitment in India. So there was a technology that I had proposed of doing written tests online. And there was so much fear that if you do online, then people will be copying for sure. They will sit beside them. Somebody else will be answering all those questions. Our whole competitive advantage will go away. Then there was pushback that HR officers enjoy doing this. It's part of their role which adds value. They can interact with the candidates. They own the process. They are the leader of this process. So don't do this. Why tell? The pros were very clear, which is that everything will happen on the system. Records will be there. Numbers, data will be available. Administration will be smooth. Time will be saved. But still, there was so much resistance. And then we said we'll do it slowly. So we did it in a couple of functions first. They loved it. And then other functions, they asked for it. Sales, they asked for it. That can we also do it? It will help. And I think within a span of 1 year, the entire organization had moved to online tests, and they have never looked back since. Now, does that mean that those jobs are gone of the HR officers? No. They are there, they are doing other parts of the recruitment process. They are maybe sometimes even sitting for interviews. They're having discussions with candidates, which otherwise they could not do because they had no time. They were checking papers. Now, it's a small example, but the point broadly is that work will shift, and a lot of administrative work, and that can be very drudgerous work as well, is getting online. Leave administration can, I mean, if you don't have a system, then you have a manual system of leaves where people mail each other. You mail your boss mails, okay, somebody else has to be forward that mail. If that person forgets, leave records are gone.
Yeah.
Doing it online where the leave records are there, you go online, you apply somebody else.
Yeah.
Now the person who used to do manual leave administration, is that person sad that my job is going away and why is this going? No, that person is very happy that I can now do something else, even if that something else is maybe Diwali celebrations, but because it's an administrative kind of a role. But even that gives more joy than collecting leave documents. So a lot of it is administration going online. Okay. And it is less about threatening jobs at this point. But yes, the pressure on skilling, reskilling, upskilling remains for all of us in our professional life.
Okay. There is a question about what is a HR BP role? Can you talk a little bit again about business purpose?
HR BP, what will a typical goal sheet look like? Let me try to make this as real as possible. Goal sheets is what is given at the beginning of the year and what defines the key performance metrics. Recruitment may or may not be there depending on the company. Assuming that recruitment is there, recruitment usually will be 20% of the goals. Learning may be 20% of the goals. What is learning? Have a calendar of training programs which are happening, ensure that people are attending those programs, doing a training need analysis so that one understands what is the requirement, designing something so that that requirement is met, and making sure that there is post-training assessment. So it's not just enough to push people into a classroom. Are they learning anything? So that will be the learning part of it. Third big part of it will be performance management. So ensuring that goal setting, mid-year, end-year, the whole performance management system works. Also, when the final rating has to be given, is that fair? Is that following the bell curve? These are some of the pieces there. Fourth requirement usually is around employee engagement. There would typically be a survey in many organizations once a year where one checks in on what employees are feeling. And whatever are the bottom areas, there are action plans around that. So making sure that there is some progress on what the team decides is an area of concern, holding that agenda, making sure that there is meetings which is happening, policies are being changed, etc. That could be the fourth one. The fifth one really will be about ensuring timely processes. Okay. So confirmations have to happen on time, transfers need to happen on time, promotions need to happen on time, separation needs to happen on time. There's usage of technology and making sure that all the gears are working properly. That is a fifth one. Apart from this, people take up projects depending on the need. Sometimes the projects are around succession planning. So let's say there are a lot of employees who are at one level and the promotions are very few. So how can you build capability so that more promotions happen? Organization can choose more people internally. That could be a project. There could be a HRIT kind of a project. There's so many different things. But the core 4 or 5 KPIs is what I described. Okay. I hope that helps.
Can we start our career in HR without an MBA?
Yes, you can. Just like you can do it for any function.
Okay. So maybe you can elaborate a little bit, like what, like maybe they should start as an intern somewhere and all that. Is that how?
So not all organizations hire MBAs for HR. Typically, without an MBA, it is going to be HR operations where one gets hired, which is all about making sure that recruitment happens on time, payroll happens on time, FNFs, etc. And there are many roles. There are many companies which have these kind of roles. What is less likely if one does not do an MBA is getting into a role like learning or getting into a role like compensation. Okay. That's where more expertise is needed. Typically, one looks at either MBA talent or people who have specialized experience in those fields to take up those roles.
Okay.
But I've seen many people who just start out right after their graduation with a job in HR operations, and then they learn and they grow. And because of their performance, then they are given some of these expertise.
What kind of challenges a fresher in HR faces when they are sitting for an interview for any of these big brands?
What are the challenges that a fresher will face?
Yeah. I mean, right after an MBA, a fresher going for an interview, what are the kind of questions? How can they? What are the kind of questions actually asked by, say, Asian Paints, Corporate Group?
I think one of the things that freshers are not fully aware of is how some of the simplest things take up so much time.
Okay.
And how challenging it can be to influence and collaborate and make sure that even simple operations happen. Many times there's an assumption that just because it's written in the policy, it will happen. But real life is more complicated than that.
Okay.
So there will be questions around when you influenced your team members, when you influenced your maybe something in the college or something in your earlier work experience. So that is a good example to share, or you can think of some of those things, keep them ready, because it's less about functional knowledge, so that's also important. And it's more about, are you confident? Are you clear about your thinking? And are you capable of influencing other people to make sure certain things happen? So that's something that I will encourage. Clarity of thought is something that I personally always check, no matter which company I belong to. So many students, because of the education system, because of their family background, because of very limited reading sometimes, they have thoughts which are actually somebody else's thoughts. Okay. It could be their elder brother, it could be their best friend from school.
Yeah.
But the moment you ask 3-4 questions, you realize that the person doesn't have any more logic to defend that argument, what they have said. And that's always a red flag, because you need people who have their own independent thinking process. I think that's quite important in surviving in any corporate career. So making sure that you are representing your thoughts and not somebody else's thoughts, that's the clear differentiator for a fresher.
You've already spoken about the qualities and the core skills that are required in HR, but how would somebody know that they have the right kind of qualities for HR? I mean, what should be the qualities that any HR should possess? Like, how would I know that I have the right aptitude before doing an HR course in HR, an MBA in HR?
Very difficult to know that. And that whole assumption there is that there is a right fit personality for a certain function. If I just look at my own batch of 63 people who graduated from TIS, everybody was just so different. So different. Some were high on empathy, some were low on empathy. Some were good with numbers, some were bad with numbers. Okay. Some were very good at reading the room, understanding the political and social nuances. Okay. Some just loved reading books and didn't have a sense of what was happening around them. All of them have made successful HR professionals. Okay. You should be confident that this is what you want to do. And then it's really staying the course which will differentiate you. If there is a feeling that there is one personality type, trust me, at 21, which is when I had entered this, your personality is still not fully developed. It is just partly, it's emerging. And there is so much more life experiences that will happen that will define the person that you really are. So I won't worry about that. If you're convinced that this is something that you want to do, you'll be great at it.
Okay, this question is something that, a lot of people think HR is equal to women. Is HR more concentrated or fascinated by women, or boys also have important, or men also have important roles to perform in HR department? Okay, so
if you just look at the data of HR professionals across India, just take a sample set. How many HR professionals are there? it may seem like women are more than 50%, but the numbers are actually more in the realm of 30%, 20 to 30% lower. We are still living in a country where women having careers, long-term careers, is rare. A recent article which came out by The Economist said that only 7% of urban women are working. 7%, which means 93% of urban women are not working. So that is a myth that there are more women in HR than men. There are actually enough of both. We need women in all functions, not just HR, because the diversity that they bring in and the difference of thoughts and inputs can make decisions better, can make help companies be better. That's a larger argument. But there are enough career options for men who want to pursue a career in HR.
Okay. Can BBA in HR help, and how can one excel to undergrad? BBA in HR.
So can a BBA in HR help you get an MBA in HR?
No, BBA in HR, and how can one excel through undergraduation? So basically, not to do an MBA, but BBA in HR, and then just getting into HR.
For anybody who is serious about a long-term career, I personally always do recommend MBAs. The simple reason is that the kind of jobs that you get, it easily saves 8 to 10 years of your life. You can still get there, but there is a time lag. And for some, the time lag is less, for some, the time lag is more. So 8 to 10 years, for exceptions, maybe 5 years, and for exceptions, maybe 20 years. The same job.
Okay.
So doing an MBA just makes you more likely to land into the right job right at the beginning so that you can grow from there. And hence, if given an option, I will always recommend it. Having said that, there are enough people that I know who do not have a MBA, but they have started right after their graduation and they worked hard. They have learned a lot. They have made sure not to stagnate. I think the big thing that one has to keep in mind is don't get stuck or don't stagnate in one company if you're not learning. If you're learning, you stay in one company for as long as you need to be. That's fine. But if you're not learning, then there's no point. You have to take charge of your own learning and your own career. So if learning is not happening, promotions are not happening, you feel you're not growing, you have to move. And there are people who have managed that well. Either they have joined a good company where they have learned and grown, or they have made switches at the right time. They wanting to build a career, and they have been able to do that even without an MBA. And I have huge respect for such professionals. It's just about maximizing your chances.
Okay, and for an HR manager, how to get into a leadership position in an organization?
So depends on what the process is for the organization to follow. There are organizations who really believe in early talent. Asian Paints is one of them, which is why people are given a lot of responsibility very, very early on. Like 5 years, 6 years, they're given a lot of responsibility. Other organizations may be a little more structured and a time taken may vary. But really, it's about following the internal process. And if your organization does not have an internal process, then you learn and then you put yourself out there. Many HR professionals feel that they're not confident. No, they how will they crack an interview, or what do they know? Can they take up a leadership role? It's very important to have self-confidence that yes, HR is a very valuable asset to the leadership team, and to go out and find that job for yourself in case your organization is not giving it. So it's the same as any other function.
For a marketing head, or for say a finance, an investment banker in an organization, can actually think of becoming a CFO and then probably becoming a CEO of a company as well. So I mean, how and can an HR manager can go up to a level where they can probably become a CEO of that same organization? Is that possible?
Yes, it is possible. It depends on the aspiration.
Okay.
Usually, if one wants to become a CEO of a company, one would do a few HR roles, but then one would also do other function roles to get exposure to the full business.
Correct.
So you do a couple of roles in HR, you move to operations, you move to sales, you move to finance. Once you've had at least a couple of functions exposure, put up your hand and say that you want to do this role.
Okay.
I can give you an example from Royal Canin, so the organization that I currently belong to. Our regional president, so we have emerging and seeds region. There are 17 countries in that region. So right from Latin America to Africa to Southeast Asia, Ukraine, India, it's a huge region.
Okay.
The regional president, person who heads it, is Sylvia Burberry. She's a woman. She did 6 years of her career in HR.
Okay.
So after HR, then she put up her hand for becoming the general manager of a unit.
Okay.
And before HR, she had a couple of years of experience in sales as well.
Okay.
So some sales, a lot of HR, and then directly general manager. And again, MAS as an organization supports women leadership and supports people from different backgrounds if they have the intent to take up such roles. But I mean, I'm just sharing because sometimes we need role models. We feel that it's not possible.
Yeah, some examples, to look at.
Some examples. So you can just Google, she's there, Sylvia Burberry, and she's a living example that it is very much possible.
So how is your role at Royal Canin different from the other HR roles that you've been? I mean, of course, now you're an HR director, so obviously, it's a leadership position. But then again, how is it different from, say, working for any of these other firms?
So I think one big difference in my current role versus my previous role is that in my previous role, I had a very large team. A big part of my job was ensuring that I was supporting them, guiding them, mentoring them, ensuring their success, while also partnering in business strategy. For Royal Canin and for MAS overall, HR has moved into the shared service framework. So rather than HR directors having team members, all of the operations is delivered by the shared service. And it's actually a global shared service. So there are parts of it in India and there are parts of it globally. So for me, interacting with my rewards lead who's based in Japan, or my talent lead who's based in Australia, and ensuring that everything gets done apart from the regular business partnering, that's a very unique experience. It's very, very different from just having your own team and giving them instructions.
Okay.
So,
let's take just 3 or 4 more questions before we wrap up. As a beginner, what one need to do to build career in HR? As I've just started preparing for CAT, and I'm from medical background. Does my UG affect PG?
What kind of UGs make you the person that you are? I wouldn't worry about whether it affects PG or not. But if you have done your medical training in UG, that's a lot of hard work. And that's a lot of remembering, memorization. That's a lot of dealing with patients and people at very different levels. It will come in use. There's a saying, nothing in life goes to waste, and no experience in life goes to waste. So I studied rural development. Now, rural development and corporate world are two completely different ball games altogether. Can I say that there is no impact? There's so much. If one looks, there are so many commonalities that one will find. So you can, I do not worry about your undergraduation. Whether it is just something like an English to whether it's something like medical to something like engineering, as long as you have made sense of that experience, as long as you're able to draw insights out of it, you have grown as a person. That's all that matters.
Is there any particular kind of profile that the TIS, during the TIS interview, they prefer? What kind of profile would that be?
Like I said, the basic social sensitivity, appreciation of the realities of our country is appreciated. It is training HR professionals for the corporate world. I think the faculty is very clear about that. So they are wanting to have bright people coming in. But at the same time, there's a certain cultural and value that a TIS professional brings in, which is different from other MBA colleges. And it is about empathy. It is about understanding the larger context. So that is important.
Okay. Is there any possibility of an HR to join a fashion firm? I think every firm will have HR department. But yeah, I've answered the question. Every firm has a HR department. So yes, you can. If it's a big firm, why not? So can you tell us about the scope of training and development domain as far as HR specialization is concerned?
So training and development is huge. There is an increasing awareness that skill upgradation is the only solution to surviving our future. With AI, with technology, with the kind of startup ecosystem that is there, that businesses are getting transformed so quickly, the only way to survive is if people internally are learning quickly.
Right.
And how will they learn quickly? Here, their learning and development or training and development plays a big role. Many training and development professionals restrict themselves because they become training coordinators. They go and outsource the training to some consultancy or some firm, and their job becomes to get the participants, make sure that the program happens, give the budget, make sure that the bill is processed. That's it.
Okay.
But I would encourage anybody who's serious about pursuing training and development to actually design programs themselves, to even deliver programs themselves, stand up and deliver, because that's what really gives you that knowledge of what is effective, what makes people engaged, and what makes learning effective compared to when it is completely outsourced. So I know of many professionals who have had an internal training and development career, and then they have become HR heads. Even my last HR head at Asian Paints, Imrana Sheikh, she started off as a training lead, and then she made her journey to becoming an HR head. And I also know of others who have gone down the freelancing consulting route, and they're very happy there as well.
Okay. Yeah. So last question, how to decide which field to go for in an MBA? How do you decide that? This is what I want to pursue. Any suggestion? Just a tip, maybe.
You should talk to people who are doing that work. And I know that IMS is creating platforms like this where you get some exposure. Correct. But the more you talk to, the more you'll realize what that function is really about. Like I remember when I was your age and I was in where you are, I didn't understand so much about what that company, what that work really meant. And I also didn't have a coaching partner like IMS to where I could get that exposure. So use some of these platforms. I mean, I'm sure a lot of this is free for everyone to register. So you can just access. You should really hear from others on what that job really is, not just what is the written definition, but what is the lived experience of that person. And that probably will give you some indication of whether this is something that you want to do or not. So the only way one can choose or any kind of choice can be made is if one knows about it. And in the knowing journey, don't let it just be about reading, but also talk to people. Talk to people in your family or talk to people in your friends' families. If you have, now you're meeting, I think one of the biggest handicaps that I had, for instance, I came from a middle-class Bengali family. We did not have too many people in the corporate world. So I did not have any people, role models that I could talk to that, what are these jobs like, etc. But the more one steps out, the more friends you make, and the more you can use access to those people to talk to their families. So I may not have had some kind of exposure here, but I've had friends who had exposure, who knew what this was. And that also gave me some clues that this is something that can be done. This is something which is viable beyond what my immediate family had to offer. So use platforms like IMS where you can build your network, you can talk to other people, and you can leverage their networks to get a real sense of what is this really like, and then decide for yourself.
Yeah. All right, that's all we have time for. Thank you so much, Sebati Iyengar. Thank you so much for being here in today's session and giving us such insightful information about human resource. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It was my pleasure. I hope that it was useful to all of you and wish you all the very best for the exams ahead.